Welcome back to Trade Wins Death Road Tournament. This is post-commentary, and some of these races I did about 2 weeks ago. While I'll mostly be talking about just my thoughts on the video, I will offer some advice, but it's not specifically a strategy video. I did screen these to see if I should even bother showing them. Each of these battles will be the final challengers and then the final boss. In this case, we have basically a clone battle. Well, not really. There's just the car, the husk of it, the hull, but the weapons themselves you can see are different. In fact, I really like that you can even see that the tires are different. In the on-screen text during the Interceptor fight, I'll tell you what tier I've assigned each item, but it's not officially listed anywhere. It's just a tier I made up. I label their tier only by what the shop sells and buys them for. In this setup, this is my second race, and it's still doing a weapons platform style build. Though I've changed it up a little bit, because I didn't start with the rage meter. I got that, I think, probably later towards the end. You can see at the very top, next to where it says Eon Conglomerate. That's my sponsor. Not a real life sponsor. That's in the game. Eon Conglomerate, that gives you an extra component choice. When it says you can take an extra component, that's a little misleading. I thought it meant that I could get 2 out of the 3 options. No. When you normally win a battle, you get 1 out of 3 options. With Eon Conglomerate, you can now pick 1 out of 4 options. Alright. So, I'm still a weapons platform because I really liked the result of it in my first playthrough, where I just started with a rage gadget. So I wanted to try a different sponsor, see what's out there. So when I picked Eon Conglomerate, it was alright. I managed to pick up a bunch of different things, weapons essentially. And I much later got the rage 1 turn buff towards the end of the tournament. So here's the setup. You can see that I've got a blade on top of the car. One of its abilities is called Warsaw. And what Warsaw does is it attacks both sides at the same time, but most importantly, it gives me rage. You can see right there on the left, does 12 damage, weakens the enemy armor, and then gives me rage. So it's a really fantastic setup for attacking, but I can no longer stay at range if I want to use it. Now at this point, I've taken quite a beating, but as the hour progresses, as we move through the different tournaments, I become better and better and better, and that's to be expected. I mean, if I win on, the first, like if the last episode of this, the first episode of this, was purely my first time doing it, and I pretty much just skidded fairly regularly without meaning to. By this point, I don't really skid at all unless I am expecting it. I keep a careful eye on my handling, so I plot out everything. I do skid, and later on you'll see me use it offensively, but in the first tournament I used it defensively once I started using it at all. This is still the same tournament. Again, we do Challenger and then Interceptor. We just move straight to the battle. Because you don't really want to see me thinking about the weapon parts. That's boring. Because some of them I spent like not really 3 minutes, but we'll say like a little good while trying to figure out what the most valuable weapon part is. The Challengers didn't offer anything special. The device on the front of this car, it gives me handling. That's why I use it. It's basically an intercooler. So if we're in the front weapon slot is a weapon style item that allows me to shoot to the sides and the back of the vehicle. I've also pretty much finished my spreadsheet of every single car part in the game, even taking notes as to what you get from what event. So it might be something like the Lawn Master engine. Yeah, that there's an engine called that. And I've never played Skyrim. With the flaming devices are called FOSS. Maybe that's probably a real thing. Because I feel like I've heard of FOSS before, or was it NOS? I don't actually know much about cars. I was actually a little worried I wouldn't be able to do this game in the first episode, that is, because I know almost nothing about cars. So the supercharger here, it has a little fist icon. That allows me to ram enemies for double the power. There is a gadget you can buy for between 50 to 100 scrap, which will double your first bash of the round. If you bash the air, that also counts, so your bash for that round will be wasted. But we're still primarily a weapons platform. I don't have a certain theme for this vehicle. This is just like the best parts I could come up with during the tournament. But as the battles go on, as we look at future races, I have a theme that I try to go for, just to maybe try out different strategies. In this case, we have the missile launcher in the back to allow me to shoot at distant ranges, because I knew that I would have to fight these little interceptor dudes. Also, I've learned that there's a visual difference between these two. Not by this point. In real life by this point, or in the recording by this point, I didn't see the difference. I didn't really care that much. But the one that has 4 propeller blades, the one that's still alive, that one buffs the interceptor. Gives him stuff like rage, which is double damage. The one that has 3 propellers weakens you. Gives you stuff like weaken and fragile. Makes you take 50% more damage. So statistically, the 4 propeller one is more dangerous. However, once I've learned more about the interceptor, which is probably in the later half of the tournaments that I'm showing you, I try to go for the 3 propeller first. Even though it does less overall statistic damage, it's easier to control because you control yourself. You don't control the enemy. So if maybe I have a turn of doing less damage and taking more damage, maybe I'll back off. Additionally, the debuffing drone needs to be in range to afflict you, so it's consistently an easier target. It weakens my damage output, so that's another reason to kill it first. But you're just as fine killing the 4 propeller blade first, because as I said, the enemy does more to you with it, because it doubles his weapons and it doubles his ramming ability. Now, I'm still a big believer, even after numerous tournaments, I'm still a big believer in going through cards quickly. By the time of this post commentary, I have completed the game with every car and every driver, but not every combination of them. I'm still using the same driver, and I will be using the same driver for almost all of these matches until I unlock, finally, the last driver that I had trouble getting to. You only unlock the drivers, not by level, not by playing the game. Well, yes, through playing the game, but like not naturally. You unlock the driver by defeating him in battle. And the last driver that I use, he's very similar to the one I have now, to the basic one. So this is just a starter driver. I like him a lot. The reason I like him is he's got low handling cost abilities, an option to draw more cards, and a free 10 block points on the first turn, which is the most dangerous one, because you will always be surrounded by enemies who are in the correct facing to use their weapons. These are all valuable to me. Finally, his driver movement options don't face any penalties that other drivers might possess. The ultimate weapon does nothing if you're not in the right tile. Some of your weapons will shoot just straight ahead, or straight behind, or directly on the sides. Your stuff is meaningless if you're not in the right position. And your maneuvering is meaningless if you don't have the right cards. While this may sound like a no-dust statement, some of the abilities that other drivers have, I don't really care about. Plus, they're very expensive. Their cards may range from like 2 to 3 or something points. I always get trashed and dislikes when I dare to offer my opinion that the game I'm playing is not perfectly balanced, designed, or written. But the current version of the driver, called Simple Bob, just sucks. I have some suggestions to keep his concept, improve the game in general, and give him an advantage in his specific playstyle. So if enough people want it, I'll offer some insights about how to use the drivers effectively. It's more than just picking the card. Some of them become powerful when comboed with other cards. If the video takes off, really. Nobody's going to want to see a guide if they don't even want to see the game. During the first recording of this, I suspected that... Okay, so I only ended up fighting the drones one time during the first recording of this, and that's only because I basically pushed him past the second line. It's hard to explain. He's at 95 hit points right now. He has 240 hit points total. If you divide that into thirds, then every threshold is at 80. At 80 hit points, at 160 hit points, he will summon drones. When he summons drones, he doesn't take its turn. So as long as you do damage to him, he will not take a turn. I mean, if you can do 80 damage a turn, then you have nothing to worry about. I do think the whole thing is lame. First, I think when you defeat the drones, he shouldn't get the move. Second, I think the drones should have a card that allows them to give him shield. Rather than giving him the shield automatically and permanently, they should only just give him the shield as an action. Those are just my thoughts. And I feel that every time you defeat a drone, he should probably be stunned for a turn. Oh, also I realized after all of this that this is a cop. First off, the Interceptor I think is a normal name for a cop car. He's got red and blue on top of it. When I was playing, I didn't notice any of that. I was just trying to kill him. But you can even see on the side of his car it says ECCPD, or East Coast City Police Department. I often miss things that don't have to do with technically accomplishing my objectives. The drones will appear on whichever side of the Interceptor you're not on. Or if you're in the middle, it's probably 50-50. Maybe there's a pattern of that, but I haven't discerned it yet. It isn't necessarily which side you were on before ending your turn. It could be based on odd or even round number for all I know. If you're in front of the Interceptor, they'll appear behind him. If you're behind the Interceptor, they'll appear in front of him. My suggestion for you is, when you break the Interceptor past the threshold, if you haven't killed him yet, then be on whichever side you want the drones to be on. So if you have really good rear weapons, be in front of the Interceptor when he summons them. If you have really good front weapons, behind the Interceptor. In this case, my car does not have any front weapons. Its front weapon is basically extra plasma exhaust. When I use it, I get +2 handling. At this point in editing, but not during the recording of this second run, found a car that gives me +4 handling for a cost of 3. Technically, if I combine a few of these cars together, I might have infinite handling. At the time I'm recording this post-commentary, I'm level 9 in the game. So there are probably still other parts to unlock. I've been taking really good notes, and since I've been recording these battles and stuff, I even happen to know what I unlock after each level. So some of the early levels come up fast and furious, and I in my notes it just says unlocks between levels 4 to 6 or something like that. So I have to probably find some other people's playthroughs where they died and unlocked level 2 by itself without unlocking 3 at the same time. Status effects play an important role in the last chunk of the game. I would say go weapons first, then consider ramming and handling midway, then status effects towards the end. So the one that's left, that is the one that weakens you. See how it is targeting me? So I have things like the purple blade on me, which means that I do 25% less weapon damage. The tan shield on me, which causes you to take 50% more health damage. I think we've brought you up to speed, and by this point I'm going to try to finish off the Interceptor without any further interference from the drones. Moving forward, the future cars that we see are going to be not really thematic, but we'll say there's a build in mind that I try to achieve, but the parts are always random, so I don't necessarily like maybe I want to be a rocket launcher car. Well, if I never find the rocket launchers, it's not going to work. So there's a launcher I think you can have on top of your car, which drops grenades, actually. You can install bazookas as a front weapon. It reaches both ahead and behind your vehicle, but not a straight line directly in front or behind. There's rocket launcher that you can use on this rear weapon. You would need a few things to combine them. I'm happy with what I've got, and I think I used Eon Conglomerate the whole episode. While I was very happy with my Rage gadget, the odds of getting that are probably not very good. So I just start going for a sponsor that lets me decide my own fate. So I cycle cards a lot because I try to find the cards I want. Basically, in card games, collectible card games, I guess, like Magic, you try to, if the faster you can draw your cards, the more power you have at your disposal. Yes, you can lose by tapping on all of your cards, but by that point, you will hopefully have defeated your opponent by using all of your cards. Are you telling me that your deck is incapable of defeating an enemy if you use all 60 cards? If so, you should probably attempt to revise your deck. Now, I have not really kept up with Magic. I played it back when it was first released, but when they released the first expansion, I stopped paying attention to it. So I guess I'm an old fogey or old timer at Magic. I don't know any of the new fancy stuff. And all my old terminology is not used anymore, like banding. I don't think anything has banding anymore. Now, High Lever is a really good card. Not all cards are created equally, which means that there are some wheels and engines that it may have higher stats but worse off cards, and some of them just require a little bit of changing your technique to use. I've had some success using the Easy Babe card, which I didn't like at all in my first playthrough, because it did handling damage to you after you used it. It cost 1 handling, and then would do 3 handling damage to you. I didn't really like that. That basically meant the card was worth 4 handling points to use. Well, you really just have to stay at high gear, and since you costs only 1 and does damage after, you can use it even when you're low on handling. And I have found that typically the Interceptor is actually easier to deal with if you stay in front of it, because the rocket jump that it uses makes it very mobile, and it has a large, fantastic range as a rocket jump. Now we go to Tournament 3. In Tournament 2, I used the unlocked card that I got, the Dyson A2000. So this is the Hot Rod. It has base 14 handling. That is base, meaning without any special gear, that's what this handling is. It's very impressive, but it only has 90 hit points and low ramming damage. So by this point, I have created a close combat vehicle of destruction. In the front, we have Exhaust. I'm trying to really lean into the Warsaw. You saw how quickly I wiped out Simple Bob. I've got the Warsaw on top and Pinball in the back. The Wrecking Ball does severe damage, 11 damage without modifiers. Now you add stuff like Rage and all that and weaken to the enemy, and you're looking at an upwards of 33 damage per hit. The reason I like the Exhaust in the front as a front weapon is it lets me draw cards, but you have to at least hit the enemy or you won't be able to draw a card. I've gotten better at reading the cards, mostly because there were a few cards that I didn't use correctly, such as Hulk or Bulk. I couldn't figure out when I wanted to use the shield ability, which is almost all the time, or the gear up ability. I thought, okay, let me pick 1 point of gear and that'll give me shields. No. Because what it says is, see how in the bottom right where it says Hulk or Bulk right now, 8 points of condition shield called block. And then below that, it's going to say gear shift. And then to the right of it, it's a different choice. 1 to 2 gear shift, and then I get 10 points of handling shield called grip. In order to use Hulk, what you do is you click on yourself once you pick the card, and then you can only get a 1 gear shift up to 5 or 3, wherever you're at. If I wanted to use Bulk, then you pick the gear instead of clicking on yourself. So that's how you do it. So some of these you just have to click yourself instead. I mean, it's probably a no-brainer to you, but when I was using it, the first thing I think about is, oh, I want to change gears. So you can see it much better now. Pacify. That is a great card. So as an orange card, that's an engine card. What Pacify does is it lets you hit an enemy, and any enemy you hit, every time you hit him, he gets 1 turn of weapon lock, and he can't shoot you. Now he can still ram you to death, and he may choose to. Like the Interceptor is no slouch when it comes to ramming damage, especially if he has Punch on and you have Weaken on. You can easily see yourself taking 20 points of damage every time you get rammed, and maybe he'll move an average of 3 times. We're looking at 60 damage. So he might actually be more dangerous ramming you than shooting you. I was just as dangerous ramming him. Well, in this case, I used my car skidding offensively. Yeah, it was much faster. You can see that get better as the battles progress. Because it wasn't just the next battle. I played the entire tournament to get to that point. I was very satisfied with my close-ranged hot rod. It's not really meant to be close-ranged because it has higher handling, less health, and less ramming damage. This one we can see is combined with the grenades on the top vehicle, missiles on the back, and then guns on the front. Other than the forward guns, the rest are temporarily there to help me reach the boss before fully committing to the design I had in mind. During the way, I pick up components and try to plan ahead what the final build will look like. The setup can change drastically in the next fight, which is why I don't spam you with the component details during the challengers. Most people probably don't care, but I'm sure that there are some people who are curious or even want to repeat the build. And because I do that, I do like that I managed to come up with a teaser of what's going to happen next by coming up with a nickname or call sign for these cars. You can also see that at the top left of the screen, I got my Rage gadget early on. Whereas the second car was just me trying to just use more advanced parts. The third car, second if only counting this episode, was me trying to just use more damaging close combat weapons. As I mentioned before, I saved some components for the finale, because I wanted to see, like, what is the most valuable stat? As I make my chart and compare parts, is health more important than bashing damage? Is bashing damage more important than weapon damage? One of the things I like about fighting the challengers is that you get their gadget. Unfortunately, the challengers do sometimes run into themselves and kill themselves. You'll always run into at least one challenger at the very end. I don't know which tournament it was, but it would have been in the later half of things, the ones I played just yesterday, because I played about half of these tournaments immediately after my first Death Roads episode, and the other half just yesterday. But anyways, I tried one of the tournaments yesterday. I tried racing to the finish line. So I picked the one with the least nodes possible. Everybody moves at the same speed. I mean, yeah. Now, before you think that's lame, it's not that they reach each node at the same speed. It's just that all distances appear to be equal, I guess, or at least as far as moving everybody goes. So sometimes you fight one final challenger, sometimes you fight two final challengers at the same time. On one run, I managed to rig it where I fought 3 challengers at the same time, with a subpar driver and car combination. I did record that particular fight, but I am saving it for a possible guide video. If the developers happen to be watching, which I doubt they ever do, my channel's so tiny, other than handing me the key and just letting me loose like a wild animal, they probably have no idea I exist. But if they would take any of my feedback, I would like there to be one ally for every driver. Because I still think it's ridiculous that the brother and sister fight each other. And while I'm sure that game story-wise they probably don't kill each other, there's really nothing to let you believe that. They're just shooting each other as willy-nilly, and I have no reason to believe anybody survives these explosions. The name is Death Roads, after all. It would be unfair if the first 2 characters were allies, but nobody else was. So have everybody have an ally, and that'll create some world building there. And that'll make it really interesting when they happen to meet you on the road. By creating factions in the game, I mean not real teams or factions, but by creating alliances, this will make it easier for them to code AI that attack each other rather than just all focus on the players. They will hit each other, but only as far as trying to target you. Even this interceptor will hit its own drones to hit you. So it's the same AI. I have no reason to believe it's not. I think it's ridiculous that if you are driving away from the challengers or whatever, they'll still just go after you. They don't care about each other. Everybody hates you. If you create an AI system with friendship in mind, then you can have them differentiate each other and start attacking each other as well. Maybe some of them will be friends, like those little drones that are shooting lasers. They could be friends, that's cool. But maybe they'll hate all the other drivers that they see. Drivers in general should probably be solo and hate each other. I'm going to be fast-forwarding these chunks here where the interceptor's out of range. As I'm backing away from this guy, I'll be fast-forwarding more. Why am I doing this? Because the secret behind this build was not actually the grenades, was not the rocket launcher. You can see I've changed those out. And I even changed out my massive hit points. Because I know that hit points alone are not going to defeat this thing, because he can ram you for 20 damage, right? 60 total. Also, this will probably be patched, but I believe Overload just affects all damage sources that you do. Now maybe it's just its wording is odd, but when I read it the first time, I thought it meant that it only influenced or increased your damage from other overloading weapons. The full text is a little wonky, but I misunderstood it. The mechanics behind Overload render one driver completely worthless to pick, which I'm currently in the middle of scripting for a driver selection video. Alright, so here's where we're speeding up. I thought about just cutting it out, really, but I managed to speed it up by rendering it, because Vegas only lets you compress things so much, like say 4 times speed, so I compressed it, rendered it, then inserted it as a new episode, and then rendered it again. So this is something like 16 times speed, which is just going to be a minute of me building up my overload. So you can see I'm up to 27 now. Overload affects all weapons, but traded in my hit points for more handling and overload. You can see at the bottom right, overload is even affecting my ramming power. So what is my idea here? Well, I've managed to defeat the boss, what is it, 2 times by now? Or 3 times total. 2 times in this episode. Can I kill him in one shot? So some of the things I'm doing, I'm trying to burn cards, so I might fire at the floor. If I use up my cards, then I get more cards to replenish them at the end of the round. So yeah, I'll just do stuff like shoot my plasma rifle at the wall or something. Yeah, I'm just staying far away from this guy. He cannot catch me at all. I am seeing his limitation here, and that's handy later when I try another build. I'm up to 81 overload now. I feel like you should probably, instead of overload, maybe it could be called overclock, but maybe that's because I'm a computer person. Maybe overloading is a term that people use on their cars. Probably not, because I would assume people generally do not have plasma weapons on their real life cars, so who knows. Like I said, I don't know anything about cars, so maybe you do, and this is like part of your regular Monday commute to work. I like how when I get to 100, that overload text, I didn't notice it when I was playing it, but that overload text has become tiny. So every point of overload gives me 1 point of damage. Before you think that I have to go up to 240, I don't. I'm done here. Because I can turn on rage anytime I want. I've actually got 13 turns of rage left. Alright, so can I one-shot him? Can I keep him from summoning any drones? I mean, I could have done this much earlier if I two-shot him, but I just wanted to see, just for my sake, can I one-shot this dude? The answer is yes. I needed to do a little bit more damage because he had protection on. I didn't want to mess up at the last second. I went a little over what I needed. So this build was my ramming build. The Hot Rod is not really a rammer, but I love handling a lot. So I'm trying to make this vehicle, well, instead of being melee combat, he just headbutts the enemy. It actually works out fairly well because I still stay somewhat maneuverable. The next build is a slower vehicle that does more ramming damage, but I have a harder time getting through the tournament with it because I'm not able to stay away from the enemy. You think, well, you're ramming the enemy, you shouldn't be, you should always be next to them. Yeah, but I have found more success ramming the enemy and leaving the scene of the crime, rather than ramming the enemy and then being there on his next turn to shoot me to death. So my suggestion is be a ramming speedster. I mean, I thought about trying to name each of these vehicles, and I'll probably name them in the chapters when I make them. So this one will probably be like Stinger or something, because it flies in, stings the enemy like a bee, and it just flies back out. Or at least that's the intention. Now it's got a hook on top of it this time, which is not a weapon that I've used previously in the other tournament episodes, or whatever you want to call it, the previous battles that you saw. It's an interesting weapon. You want to be careful and know the difference between hook up and hook back. Hook up, the one that I have in my hand right now, sends you forward, thus you will do ramming damage. Hook back, it does the reverse. You will receive ramming damage. Because in order to pull the enemy backwards, in-game mechanics, he just moves back one tile, which counts as him ramming you. So I always use that to pull the enemy in, and then I use hook up once they're there. Now, I wonder if the game is 3D at all, because cars do swerve and stuff. It probably isn't, but if these are actually 3D models viewed from overhead, it would be awesome if they went for the approach of cinematic camera angles when moves were made. And that'd be very easy with the turn-based style movement they have. When a car moves 3 turns forward, it moves 1 tile at a time. So I think the cinematic angle would help with that. But here's what I really would like to see. If there are combo moves or things that are easily decided ahead of time, such as a hook up, killing an enemy, rather than doing everything one at a time, mash them into a cinematic experience. Let's say I do a skid, and the skid decides that it's going to draw 3 cards for me. One is ram left, ram right, and then skid back. Fine. Instead of moving 1 tile at a time, make it like this really, make it one animation. And yes, that would mean that you'd have a lot of different variations of skid. Get it? I think that would make it so much better, because this is supposed to be represent your car going out of control at incredible speeds. But really, it's when to slide to the left, slide to the right. I'm like doing the Mambo or something in a very calm, controlled environment. We still have a ramming vehicle. I do 14 damage per ram. One of the reasons why I wanted to try ramming is, whereas shooting, you might take 1 shot or 2 handling. With ramming or movement, you can sometimes find cards that let you do 2 movement for 3 handling. As long as you can get your ram above 8 or so, you can probably out damage weapons. I would say that out of my cars, the ramming cars were probably a little bit harder to pull off, and I wouldn't recommend making those builds. There's still some amusing elements to them, but it's not as easy as just shooting a gun. My favorite build was one I've been planning for a long time. It's the final form of my car in this episode. Plasma Mark is okay, but one of my issues with hitting the enemy's handling is that sometimes this makes them out of your range. And one of the things that could result in this is the inability to do the cinematic experience I was talking about earlier. Let's say an enemy has 4 handling left and 16 hit points. Let's pretend that your plasma weapon does 8 damage to both condition and handling. That means that after your first plasma, he will skid out of control, and he might even skid out of your range. This means that the game could not register you trying to fire both of them at the same time and then create a cinematic experience. I'm not looking for like some sort of movie thing, I'm just using that as a term. Let's say that I choose to shoot an enemy. Maybe I've got two attack cards of the exact same card, and most of them do that. They'll have 2 of the same tier attack and then a slightly more expensive attack as a 3rd card. If I'm picking one, it would be nice if instead of just picking the 1 attack, I could just like click and drag both of them on top of the enemy to use at the same time. And it'll just shoot them at the same time. Or while I'm shooting one gun, if I click the other gun that does the exact same weapon card, it just kicks in and fires also out of the other gun or whatever. And I understand this is probably not going to happen, but these are the little fancies that I think about when I'm playing tournament and trying to wonder what could happen to make the game more powerful. Upgrade our game, essentially, like we upgrade our car. I have a whole lot of suggestions for the game, but since they've already assembled a physical board game with cards in it, I worry this has in fact limited the potential development of the video game itself. They wouldn't want the 2 games to be drastically different, as in the board game is pretty much a direct 1-to-1 replication of the video game. I do think the music, I think there's 2 different, tracks is not probably the right word for this. the music changes depending on whose turn it is, and it does so in a very fluid way. And I think there's maybe 2 variations of this. Since there's about 20 to 30 battles per tournament, it would be nice if they had maybe 10 variations, 15 variations. That is probably not going to happen. And I think in a racing game, having an awesome soundtrack would lend itself so much to the experience. In fact, some of the sounds of the game are kind of lacking. For example, when I change, say, my engine in my car, you'd expect to hear something. Now, the car just jiggles a little bit, and then you get your new engine. I mean, sure, I'm glad I don't have to wait for them to install an engine in my car. That would suck. It's like, okay, well, yeah, we'll put in a new part. You sit here for 15 minutes, an hour, or however long it takes. Probably an hour. Again, I know nothing about cars. Okay, but I do think some sound effects would go a long way into making the game more impactful for the player's experience. I mean, you listen to the laser gun and plasma sound effects, and you'll probably understand what I'm talking about. This car is a light ramming vehicle, and I don't have as much success as I did with the previous tournaments, but I still win. The reason I suggest developing ramming mid-game is because by that point you are able to raise your max handling and your current ram damage. Remember, I have made my own crib sheet or chicken scratch notes on when you can get certain parts. So I didn't know this during the first run, but by this time I have done numerous successful runs. Yes, that sounds like bragging. I don't, but it is just a matter of fact. Weapon parts have rocket jump and launch control. Launch control has its use if you're trying to keep the enemy at bay, but the issue here is, since it's a rear-mounted weapon, keeping them at bay, all it really does is keep them from hitting you. And that sounds pretty cool until you think about the fact that if you just use rocket jump, you already keep them from hitting you. Launch control is one handling cheaper, but I haven't really found a way to make it better than rocket jump. Because rocket jump lets you ram enemies in front, lets you move around. Launch control, if it doesn't hit the enemy, it doesn't move anybody. And that's probably why it's cheaper. I just feel that it's too inferior. There are a lot of cards that, when directly compared with each other, don't seem to be anywhere near balanced. What they should probably do with Launch Control is maybe decrease the damage on it, add in some burn ticks on it, because as it is right now, it's just not that useful. Okay, this one, I finally changed vehicle, so it's probably a little more exciting for you as the viewer. And I'm sorry that I use the hot rod so much. I just really like having handling, right? Due to it having the highest handling and a good card selection. More on that in a car guide if I publish it. It is my favorite car. So I thought, okay, I have experimented with using a light car basher, and I topped out maybe about 14 damage per bash. I have now, this is called the monster car, and I thought, and if the previous car was nicknamed the Stinger by me, this one would probably be nicknamed something stupid like Tiny or Rhino, whatever. You notice that it says 56 in the bottom. That's only for the first hit, because I've basically got a 4 times damage bonus right now. One of my gadgets, you can see I get a lot of them. I like gadgets. One of my gadgets gives me double ramming damage on the first ram of that round. And then the other double comes from having punch. So I have 4 times damage. Now I'm up to a paltry 28. So that means that my base is 14. At 56 ramming damage, you can one-shot almost all of the normal vehicles that you see on the road. With a little bit of protection, as in like the protection buff, you can probably just activate that and shrug off anything else any survivors have to throw at you. Now remember that 46 damage is only for the first ram. Everything after that's going to be 28, as long as you have the punch card activated. You can see here that I've started using Happy Feet, not because I really wanted to, but because this was part of a wheel set that added more damage. You see that my wheels have spikes on them, so they're obviously meant for ramming. I'm going to chalk this up as a bug, but if you have the overload damage buff, any card you use that inflicts handling damage to yourself as payment is enhanced by your overload. It's a careful balance. You don't want to end your turn and get shot to death, so you want to be able to move and attack and not be in their range. With this monster truck, it's not easy staying out of the range, so you're going to take a lot of hits. And yeah, my ramming damage is an ungodly 56, but yeah, without keeping protection cards on hand, you're going to be eating a lot of damage. Oh, and I can confirm that removing gear will lower your hit points. If you have 120 hit points, and then let's say you remove tires that have 20 hit points, so now you're at 100 health. You put those tires back on, too bad, so sad. You're still at 100 health out of 120. You just miraculously lost 20 hit points. It will, in fact, remove all hit points associated with that component's health, regardless of your replacement part. You are at your maximum 110 hit points, and swap out in one single move your engine that gives you 10 hit points for an engine that gives you 50 hit points. You will now be down to 100 out of 150. Because I've become a ramming guru, I guess. Because I've become a ramming guru, what I specifically look for are cards that have multiple move sets. By this point, I'm able to read the cards very well and not make as many mistakes trying to decipher what they mean with their hieroglyphics. So for example, make space on the left, you can see that there's 4 different icons on the gears 3 to 5. Make space is an incredible asset for just destroying enemies. And it's only at 2 handling cost. That's why I say not all cards are created equal. Look at your other 2 handling cost cards. The first one indicates that you will move, and the red arrow behind the solid arrow indicates that the enemy will move also. So we'll call this a push. And then the options after make space on the second set, it's a bash, which means you stay on your tile and the enemy gets pushed back one instead. You see those damage numbers? That's because I'm actually making him eat the wall. So how well does the monster truck fare against the interceptor? I only have a paltry 100 hit points. If this guy cuts loose on me, I am a goner. If I had to pick a ramming vehicle, I would pick the lighter one. But that being said, the lighter vehicle did have 240 hit points and took only 80 in damage, which is still more than this one has taken. Now, the hull itself is not as important as all the components, but it does play a factor. At the start, the red car has 100 instead of 90 hit points, 12 instead of 14 handling, does 5 condition bashing instead of 2 condition bashing, and does 4 handling bashing instead of 2 handling bashing when compared to the green car. Now, the plow I use only because it increases my punch. I really don't like the abilities it has. Dig down gives me punch, but then makes me slide backwards. The best use of this is to be in front of the opponent and use the card. The punch will activate first, and then you end up immediately attempting to move into the enemy's tile, causing ramming damage. This vehicle has incredible damage numbers, but I personally feel it is less effective than the Speedy Rammer. Alright, so let's do this make space. We see that I'm cramming this dude into the wall. Each bump into the wall takes 10 condition and 5 handling away. 50% extra condition damage for the fragile debuff, which is the brown shield icon. Now I don't have to worry about his counterattack because he's below the threshold, so he's going to spend his turn summoning drones. That is the only nice thing the game does, is that when he summons drones, or the game triggers drones, so to say, he is unable to move. I think the game should continue with that, and when the drones die, he can't move. Alright, we see the 4 propeller buffs him up. 3 propeller, by this point you should recognize that's going to weaken me. instead of doing 14 damage, I went down to 11. When you're trying to build a ramming car, having more different sections on your card are more important. So just double clutch means I can ram someone twice. It's more valuable than, say, Easy Bay that has 1 and 2 up down. Unfortunately, my car only has 2 ways to get punch. I didn't find all the components I wanted. So I have high octane, which gives me punch and ram. I was hoping for supercharger, I think, but I didn't find that on this tournament. And dig down, which gives me punch. Having just 1 card is not enough. If you have maybe 20 cards in your deck, 2 cards is already 10%. And unless you have Eddie's gadget, at the end of your round, fill your hand up to 6 cards. You notice that I actually have a different driver this time. In the previous tournament, we unlocked this guy. He was in a gray car last clip. So everything I've done until now has been with default starter driver, which means you can do it too. So he will replace our Murdoch driver from the beginning of the game. He has very similar abilities. When I looked at them, I finally decided, okay, this is a different driver I can get behind. The other drivers, skills way too expensive, and they didn't mean as much to me. You also got to consider their personal gadget. Because I've managed to use, to great effect, the oil weapons and side flaming weapons. The biggest one I have a beef with is the punching weapons. Because they send you backwards too. There's one driver I'm thinking would use them best, but it's still not a weapon I would pick over in everything else. So it's basically a giant arm on your vehicle, and if you punch left, it'll send the guy left on the highway, up to you, the player viewer, but left on the highway, and it'll send you down to the viewer or right on the highway. So basically it creates this giant gap between the two of you. If there were more death collisions that happened in the middle of the road or something, I could see that being a thing. Also, I think it's a little sad that in the final mission, the highway is completely clear. Yeah, I get it, this is the city, and it should be very impressive. But you basically have removed an element of the game, the terrain. And the terrain might be a really impressive thing to have in a racing game. Maybe this is the right way to go, but I do feel that it's a little sad that the entire battlefield is this plain, static battlefield. There's nothing going on in it. There was I might have the name wrong, but there's a big YouTuber who goes by Freddy Wall. I think one of his videos on how to choreograph a fight scene is incorporate the background or terrain as much as possible. And then there was another video by a smaller YouTuber, but it's blowing up. His name is Of Elves and Droids, and he had a video that covered how large-scale Hollywood battles are meaningless because it's just 2 blobs running into each other and there's no tactics involved, no strategy. In this map, there is no strategy to be had other than can you do 240 points of damage before the guy kills you. They replaced the map difficulties with the drone difficulties. I understand. But I think there should be something on the map. It could be, for example, laser force fields, because this is a police car. Maybe they would have laser force fields set up ahead of you, right? They're already sending drones to you. I mean, think of it like a futuristic rumble strip is what they're called. Maybe not rumble strip is the right word. Spike trap. I don't know. There should be something though, and maybe the enemy car would be immune to it, or maybe they would just slow down and you would take damage. Yeah, the computer thinks a lot. Sometimes it's never locked up on me, but it does spend some time just thinking. So you can see that I'm actually getting close to death here. This is why I said, like, I have a little bit more trouble with the more powerful ramming, but with less maneuverability. What you're looking at now is the last tournament. These challengers are just a warm-up, and then I evolve into my final form as I face against the Interceptor. I've been carefully amassing pieces because there's something that I've wanted to try forever. I tried it in the second tournament, and I couldn't really get it to land solidly. I lacked the experience in my second run that I have now. Even though I used some of the cards and it worked, but not as well as I would hope. I didn't manage to get the awesome impact I wanted. So, since this is my final tournament of the episode, thought, let's finally see if we can pull it off with all the knowledge I have of the game. By the way, the game doesn't fully have an implemented unlockable system yet. It's clearly there. I clearly have equipped parts, even recorded their data before officially unlocking them by leveling up after completing the run. But yeah, it's kind of a surprise, so I don't want to talk too much about what the specifics are, but it is something I've been trying to make work my entire Death Roads tournament career. Also, the car on the left, that is Murdoch, the first driver I've been using all this time. We aren't done with the video yet, but since I still have you here, I would suggest 2 videos if you like this kind of game. They're in the description below, and will be linked at the end as in-screen videos. Rock and Roll Racing and Space Wolf. Rock and Roll Racing being a racing game, and Space Wolf being a card game. The crossbow I'm using on top of the vehicle, I don't really care about its damage abilities. What I care about is this smoke bomb, which adds a weakened component to the enemy. But again, this car that you're seeing, it is the tournament win, but this car itself, the weapons will change drastically in the next episode. I look at the top left and I'm a little sad that I don't have an impressive stockpile gadgets here, but I mean, it's still 5, it's still a lot. You need about 50, 75, or 100 scrap per gadget that you find if you don't kill people to get them. Well, defeat other challengers. As a baseline, I wouldn't bother visiting a chop shop unless you are ready to shop for a gadget. And they don't always have gadgets available. Sometimes they have more than one. Gadgets will also sell for up to 100 scrap, and I would recommend selling even your currently used gear if you had to, unless it would be near impossible to replace. In my parts spreadsheet, I call those tier 8, since they are the 8th tier in terms of market cost. Haven't gone any higher than 55, so that kind of gives you a baseline of how much scrap you need to bring before going to the store. The reason I talk about that is it basically consumes an entire turn to go to the store. You can either go to the store or go to 1 to 2 scrapyards. I say 1 to 2 because some cities only have 1 scrapyard on the side. Most of them have 2. With scrapyards, there's a chance of finding an actual just straight-up component. From what I can tell, the rewards from a scrapyard or battle is influenced by how far you are in the game, so it's always worth it. When you're selling components, they can be sold for as little as 7 scrap and as much as 25. Typically, you get about a third of the price of each component, but it's not an actual percentage. And there are so many parts that are very similar, like 19-inch aluminum wheels, 19-inch aluminum sporting wheels, 19-inch aluminum racing wheels. And of course, only for the nitpickers and people who love little details like this. And I'm not saying it because it bothers me. I'm saying this because I like finding the tiny little things that nobody's supposed to care about. But the carbon fiber, only for the 22 wheel. It doesn't say inch. It has 1 apostrophe rather than the quotation marks. They're really called primes, not quotation marks, if anyone cares. I'm sure it's just a typo, but this means those carbon fiber wheels are 22 feet. They spell adjustment with an E as well. Adjustament. I don't know if that's a meme or anything, like it's a reference to something. Or maybe that's the way you spell it when you're talking about cars. I don't know. But again, I'm not bashing the game by any means. I'm not even criticizing the game. Just pointing out, like, hey, the peculiarities. Yeah, stocking up on your weapons and activating rage mode is definitely a very impressive way to go. Alright, this is the final form of my tournament career. Published to date, that is. I have been able to kill this guy without him damaging me. Can I stay at close range, wrestle with him, and completely shut him down without taking damage? I already technically did no damage when I kept him out of range and then shot him with a single overloaded blast. Sorry, so if you aren't quite as familiar with all these buff icons, the blue lock icon means that he cannot use wheels. So those are any blue cards. The green icon, lock icon, means that he cannot use driver cards, such as how I have Smokin' and Rollin' and Contemplating. Unfortunately, I never found an engine lock card. That's sad. I do my best. I mean, there are components that will lock enemies' engine, but I just didn't find any on the final run. Not every tournament, like it's not like I'm guaranteed component parts, right? So I never found anything to lock his engine. But it's okay, because I can lock down all his other cards. But the question is, can I still manage to get away unscathed? Also, I tried a burning deck. It doesn't burn a card per burn tick. Not to be confused with Rumble, which does damage. Burn makes the afflicted card lose cards. Burns 2 cards, and then it reduces burn tick by 1. So even if a guy has 10 burn ticks, or 10 on his burning duration or whatever, he doesn't burn 10 cards or 20 cards. No, that's sad. I was hoping to be able to burn all of his hand, and then locked his driver card, he'd be completely unable to do anything. Rumble is still probably the most damaging thing in the game, because it accumulates. Rage and Punch are more immediate bursts, so I would rank them as second most damaging. Now for me to lock down his weapon, that means I need to hit him twice with Pacify. Otherwise, I'm just barely managing to stay above water. We want to do more than just tread water. We want to do more than just survive. We want to thrive. So nail him down. That is the upgraded version of the spike attack. It not only does wheel lock, but it also does driver lock. The only thing he can do is use his orange, or engine cards, which are, for most cars, just forwards and backwards move. Each car, each engine will be different. He is about as effective as someone using a skateboard in this tournament. Even though he can't take damage, he can still be affected by buffs. Please, 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 please do not prevent him from taking debuffs. It's already cheesy and lame enough that he doesn't take damage when the drones are out. If you allow him to take... If you stop allowing him to take debuffs from the player, and still allow him to take buffs from the drones, this is how you know that the developers just hate players. I mean, not hate is the right word, but they feel that it's a contest between them and the player. That's like if you have a DM that says either the DM, like in D&D, it's called a Dungeon Master, the guy who runs the game. It's like if you had a DM who says either the DM wins or the players win, instead of both of them are just playing a game together. But that's how I see it. That's just my opinion about that whole thing, is when a developer patches something, for example, Sons of the Forest, they patch out all the speedrunning gimmicks. But they don't patch the things that people actually think should be fixed. Like spawning in the base. They eventually did patch that, but I think the very first patch was like, okay, yeah, we don't want you to use a stick to get to the end game. I'm gonna tell you that while it may have been marginally easier to patch that, a lot more people are probably affected by spawning in the base. It affects more people, affects them more often, because how many times are you gonna do the stick thing? Maybe 3 times at most, if you did it once at all. I personally have never done it because I didn't need to. I was gonna see these cutscenes so many times that I generally ignore the cutscenes, because when I record them, I see it during that time, and then I see it again during editing, and then I see it again during the proofing I do before uploading. So I see it at least 3 times. But yeah, if the developer decides that, hey, we don't like you being able to lock down the interceptor, we're just gonna take away your ability to do this and not address any other concerns. That's how you know that they have an antagonistic relationship with the players. Even if they don't personally feel bad, that is the relationship they've assigned. If you find a successful strategy, nope, don't do it. We don't want you to play that way. I started this battle with 90 hit points. I know I have out of 110. That's because I swapped a gear too late. If you swap your gear before you get repaired, then yeah, you'll be fully healthy. But if once you've gotten repaired before the final battle, if you swap your gear after that, too bad, so sad. Alright, so he is hitting me, but I'm not taking any damage. Because these drones don't really do any real bashing damage, and I have lots of protection on. Because I got reload, which gives me 8 shield, as long as I stay in 5 gear. Staying at gear 5 is easy if you don't get out of control. So I'm keeping the enemy firmly on lockdown. Now this is definitely not a fast way to win. I just wanted to see, can I keep the enemy from damaging me? Can I totally dominate them? So even though I don't really care about the handling damage, plus it makes the enemy unpredictable, I do like getting to draw a card after the fact. Now, the game did patch by this point of the recording, and I wonder if the developers made it where the enemy's more likely to ram the wall, or if I was just more fortunate this time around. Like maybe during the recording, I just didn't have any luck getting the enemy to ram the wall. Well, during this recording session, the enemy was just ramming the wall non-stop whenever they were skidding. So, I don't know. If they secretly improve the probability of that, I think that's a good thing. Otherwise, handling damage just sucks. If you're just looking for an easy tip for the game, don't use handling damage weapons and keep your handling bashing damage to a minimum. In fact, I think they should probably do a little bit different with handling damage. Maybe don't make the enemy skid out of control until you finish your turn. The same would apply to you. You don't skid out of control until the enemy has finished his turn. I think that would probably resolve a few issues with handling being so weak sauce. And then the regen stat would matter more, because that could be the number of handling points the player has to work with at the start of his turn, rather than be some intermediary number before they move randomly again. So I've tried a handling build before, and it sucked. I mean, you saw me for like 100 turns or whatever, build up my overloading damage. I'm willing to go for the long haul, but handling, nothing doing there. That just overall is not a useful way to build your car. When you're ramming the enemy, they can ram you back if they skid, unless you're in front of them. They'll probably move out of your range after skidding, because you're ramming them, so you need to be adjacent to them. If you're shooting the enemy, you probably have a limited range of ways you could shoot them, and they can skid in any direction, probably outside of your range. Now, the one that's least likely to be skidded out of your range is, of course, front weapons. But your side weapons and rear weapons will be redundant with it. So maybe a front weapon that does handling damage, like the plasma weapons, could have some merit, but overall, it's just not worth it. Sure, losing control for the player is obnoxious because then you have to re-move where you are. But because you're playing a tournament where everybody is pitted against you, you're fighting battles between, on average, 2 to 4 enemies. Right? I know you can sometimes fight 5 or so, I get it. But on average, 2 to 4 enemies, none of them care about anything except doing damage to you. So their movement does not actually matter. And this is coming from a person who likes to slam the enemy into the wall to kill him. Condition damage, that's the red bar, is permanent, and there's very few chances to get health back. The blue bar doesn't matter, starts full every battle, every round. So I've been gradually building up burn damage on this Interceptor. Even though he doesn't take it when he's invincible, he's still getting those stacks of burn damage. And he's still getting those stacks of lock. As long as I keep him stacked down, he can't move. He is still playing the occasional card, but it's less effective than even the starting enemy, the 16 hit point laser drone. It's only round 5, by the way. I'm sure it feels longer because I am drawing an unbelievable amount of cards with my setup. Now for the lockdown car, positioning is vital. If he so much as skids into me, I could end up taking damage. He's going to have punch, I'm going to have fragile. I would need about 4 gear 5 uses of the reload card to not get scratched from one accidental skid. Spike Strip has one of the most impressive ranges I've seen, being a 2x5 tile wide range. It does have a very expensive cost of 3 handling, however. One of the reasons why I value handling so much is the more handling you have, the more cards you get to play. And yes, the difference between a component giving you maximum handling versus a component helping you do handling damage is worlds apart. And you know that I like to go through my cards. Basically, every card you use is a bullet you fire at the enemy, whether it's a reload or smoke bomb. Cards in your hand aren't doing anything. Play them. Yeah, there are some times where I don't spend them, such as if I'm saving my rage card for a bunch of weapon cards. I get it. But what I'm trying to get at is, by having so much handling, I'm able to play maybe like say 6 Spike Strip cards. At base handling of 10 or so, you might be able to play 3 of them instead, and that's assuming that you're in range and you have those cards. With 19 handling, I could just keep playing reload or draw new cards like Oversteer. Again, I don't want to end my turn too close to him in case he does choose to ram me, because I haven't locked down his engine. He technically can still move, and some orange cards do let you cross lanes. Because even if you remove the engine from your car, you get a spare engine part, like a default engine card. Same thing for your tires. Now if you remove your weapons, you don't get a replacement weapon card for that, so you will have nothing. Not shown in this episode. I didn't even bother to record it since it was a very slow run. But I did finish a run with only 1 equipped weapon at a time. Why? Because that would mean that you get to go through those cards very quickly. Because every time you deplete your card deck, you reshuffle them and you get to get those cards again. So if you have, like, say, engine card that gives you handling back. Controlled Chaos. Costs 3 handling, lets you move twice, and each time you hit an opponent, you trigger getting 2 handling back. For a total of 4 handling if you hit them twice. I also like to combo that with Intercooler, which costs 0 handling and gives you 2 handling back. So if you had a limited number deck, and as many cards as possible gave you handling back, let you draw or exchange new cards, your turn would never end. Now, thankfully, enemies never skid forward. Maybe there is a driver somewhere out there that has a skid deck that makes them go forward, but I doubt it. And I hope they never add something like that. They might do it just to be different, but geez, I hope they don't. That would make skidding much more unpredictable, and while skidding is supposed to be by nature unpredictable, just the way it's handled, I think, is a little weird. Because in many times when you're attacking an enemy, them skidding out of control, it's advantageous to them. That's why I intentionally skid sometimes. It's to my advantage. It shouldn't be to my advantage. It should be. I'm not saying like there's something wrong with the system when skidding is consistently the best move to do. Not all the time. I mean, a lot of times there's something good about it that you can do, such as having an extra set of moves. I don't mean by this statement they should make skidding more penalizing. I think it should just be retooled. I've thought about it a lot after playing one of the drivers who specializes in skidding. You see, an antagonistic developer would take that feedback and say, okay, I'll just make skidding do damage to you, or you always ram the wall. A reasonable developer interested in instead of trying to beat the player, let the player have fun, probably do something about the skidding to make it more wild. So we'll see. That's assuming they even hear my feedback in the first place. Now remember, I'm trying to do no damage, that's why I have to think about everything. So if I slip up once, the run is screwed. And it's just no damage against the boss. This wasn't no damage for the whole tournament. Unfortunately, since I can't spike strip him anymore, I was ready for that. You can see that because he skidded, he was out of position. Now, yes, while one guy did die, he was going to die anyways from burn damage. At this point, all I'm trying to do is set up debuffs on the bad guy. Controlled Chaos. Every time I hit him, I get 2 handling. The thing is, though, you get your handling deducted after the fact. When you use things that build up your handling, use them when you've already depleted some. If you have 19 out of 19 handling, you won't go back to 19. You won't even go up to a temporary 20. You'll be down to 16 if you use Corrupted Chaos, because it pays the handling cost after you're done. That is something I hope they change. Because there are several abilities that give you handling, and they don't do you any good if you are already capped out. So they never reimburse you. It's not a rebate. Alright, he's got no more drones. He has 21 burn damage. I've managed to successfully keep him locked down, and I'm still at 90 hit points. Yes, I'm not at max hit points because I didn't start the battle at max hit points, but I still haven't taken any damage from him. So while this battle did definitely take longer than some of the other previous tournament battles, I just wanted to see, could I debuff this guy to Oblivion? Could I make a debuff strategy work? It wasn't meant to be the most ruthless or economical strategy, but could I just dominate him? I don't know if this video is anything anybody is interested in. I'm still trying to find my ground here. Maybe you don't want to see a compilation or an hour-long montage of me defeating the final boss, but let's see how this does. I currently get half a script for each driver guide, a car guide, all parts guide, and even a how to pick your highway guide. Because there are some advantages you can leverage, and everything in the game is stacked against you. If I'm going to have the time to finish them, this video will need your support. Alright, if you've made it this far, thank you very much for Tran Wins Death Roads Tournament. I'll see you next time.